This is not another econ podcast. I'm Ian Kaneshiro. Today, we're diving into the world of independence and entrepreneurship with Nick Milani, a master of e-commerce who has turned his expertise into a lifestyle. Nick, who was originally born in the Netherlands and has called Toronto home since he was a kid, embarked on his e-commerce journey during his Master's of Engineering program. And that's when he realized that his passion wasn't in the traditional 9-to-5, but in leveraging the digital marketplace to carve out his own path. And so starting with simple arbitrage, where you're buying products in the US and selling them in Canada, Nick quickly found his niche. And today, Nick is not just an e-commerce entrepreneur, but a digital nomad who lives and works by his own rules anywhere in the world. And so his experiences range from building a brand focused on sustainable children's products at Penguini, which despite its challenges has taught him invaluable lessons, to managing big brands and reselling their products on Amazon. And he's also taken this and expanded his whole journey into coaching and content creation, sharing his journeys and insights through TikTok, and developing software tools for resellers with another engineer. So in this episode, we're going to dive into just some of the things that Nick has done during his times where he's transitioned between different business models and the freedoms and challenges of being your own boss. And so hopefully you learn a little bit, and it might push you to kind of take that leap yourself. And so whether you're just starting off as an entrepreneur in the Amazon and e-commerce space, or you're just curious, I'm sure we'll dive into some, really good nuggets here. So let's get started. Nick, thanks for being here.
Awesome, Ian. Yeah, thanks for the intro. Thanks for having me as well. Just listening to you talking about, I guess what I've done. I'm like, geez, has it been that long? Have I done that much? But, day by day it goes by and you get it done.
Totally. Yeah. I completely understand that. And it's like really weird. Can be a really weird thing to kind of have that timeline put out in front of you. But, it just shows that you have done a lot. And so, but one of the things that really stands out to me is around, that motivation to go from, engineering school and say, that's not my cup of tea. I'm going to move into kind of the e-commerce space and work for myself. Can you talk to me through, a little bit of that history there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's relevant to a lot of people who are told to go to school and to take the safe route. And so coming from an immigrant family, my parents have always believed in going to university/college and being able to get a degree and then being able to get a high-paying job. And so I did go that route for the most part, but then I realized that in my early 20s, I started to form a gut feeling and a idea of what I wanted to do. And that's when I started to tinker with the idea of like, hey, what if I don't want to do this? What if I could do other things? What kind of life do I want to live? So I started to ask all these questions and started to think about my angle and my route. And so as time went by, I started to develop that gut feeling more and more and start to really understand what I wanted. And so, one thing led to another. The reason I started my master's degree was just because I would have more freedom still to be able to explore, rather than if I started a job, I would have already entered the workforce and have 8 hours of my day sucked into something I would hopefully want to escape. So the reason of the master's was like a little extra time to explore, because when you're a student, there's less expectation. You still have a lot of time on your hands. And so it worked, throughout that master's, I experimented with a bunch of stuff, and e-commerce just stuck towards the end.
Cool. I didn't realize that you experimented with some other things. Where, anything notable worth sharing, and, what went well and what didn't go well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my master's program was actually engineering with innovation and entrepreneurship. So it was a really good segue into the entrepreneurship world. Mm-hmm. But we had to create a business, or at least come up with an idea to do customer discovery, customer validation, and then acquisition. all in the 14 months of the program. And for me, it was interesting and difficult because in a startup world, in the entrepreneurship world, you have to have some sort of a hard skill, some sort of a technical skill to form a team, to join a team, to give value in a team. And I didn't have anything. I didn't have any hard skills. I just knew I was good with people. So I guess I was good at sales. Like, I had no idea. And then I thought I had great ideas, but ideas are a dime a dozen, right? It's all about execution. So what happened there is I started to really understand that, like, I need to have a hard skill. I need to bring something to the table. So that's when I started to dive into different topics and different, I guess, niches that I think or thought that I could be good at. And yeah, like, I would say I started off with HTML, CSS. So I started to like build websites, and that was going well. But then I realized this might not align with what I want to do. I'll be stuck at like in front of my computer like forever, and I have to become such an expert at it to become really, really good. So I was like, nope, this is a little too like stuck to your computer for me. And then after that, I tried day trading. So I tried day trading for about 4 or 5 months. Liked it, had some success, had some losses. But then at the end of the day, I realized that you need to be so you need to be so
tuned to the market.
Aware.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. You need to be aware of the market, but you need to be aware of your emotions, because it's such an emotional game of putting your emotions out of like what you're invested in and not just waiting for an extra whatever, just having rules. And so very emotional driven. And I was like, okay, this is hard as well. And so, you know, it was just one thing after another that then ultimately got me into the e-commerce game. But then when I realized that it checked all the boxes, that's when I was like, okay, let's do this.
Wow. Yeah, I guess, you know, there's probably things in there that you learned in these different ventures that didn't work out that you could probably pivot into, you know, what eventually ended up being your main business, your main money generator. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about that entrance into e-commerce. You know, was Amazon the first stop? And, you know, what was the first kind of business model? It was the arbitrage route?
Yeah, so good question. I would say when I revisited e-commerce, and I say revisited because I realized that I had dabbled with eBay back in like 2005, 2006, when I was like 13 years old. But I'd never considered it a career. I'd always just thought it was like a cool hustle. You know, I would buy and sell stuff on it. I would buy stuff, let's say like jerseys and shoes, and sell it to like my friends at school, knowing that I could get cheaper prices in the States or anywhere else versus like what's in store in Canada. So I like dabbled with eBay a while ago, and then I started to realize, like, why don't I explore this a little more? And at the time I read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and that's when it started to click again. And I was like, like I could scale this, I could outsource, I could potentially live a 4-hour work week, but let's just say that you'll probably work 10 years of 60-hour weeks until you get to that 4-hour week. Or,
fair enough.
You know, you got to work hard to definitely get there. And then, yeah, like when I started to get back into e-commerce, no, it wasn't Amazon initially. You know, it was really just buying products, or at least like this product, which was Rogaine at the time, like men's hair growth product. I started to realize that it was way cheaper in the US and a little more expensive in Canada. And I'm talking like, let's say in the US it was $50, and in Canada it was like 120. So, you know, it's a considerable difference.
It's over 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Canadian, you got to do okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, but more or less like 80 to 100%. And that's when I started to like look on Craigslist and like Kijiji we have in Canada, where we're able to like at least see if other people are selling it more just like face to face. And then I started to realize that, yeah, like people are doing that for cheaper, right? They were selling it for maybe $80. So they're making like $20-$30 in between per product. And so I started to buy from those same guys on Kijiji in bulk to be able to save like $5-$10. They're like, yeah, if you buy 20, we'll give you a discount. And so that's when the whole world of buying in bulk and wholesale came to life for me. And then it was like I was selling on like my own website even. I was selling on Shopify with Google Ads when I could actually use Rogaine and that stuff as like a Google AdWord. And things were going well. I was selling like really well on my Shopify store with like the tag of buy Rogaine for less in Canada, right? Like very just simple. And that was working. It was doing really well. And then it was one day where my professor in my master's program was like, hey, like, have you ever tried Amazon? And I was like, no. And at the time, like most people, I thought Amazon sells directly themselves. I didn't realize it was a marketplace. So I was like, okay, let me explore it, and then I realized that I could literally list the Rogaine in like a few seconds because the listing was already there. And then I tell this story all the time. Like there was one weekend where I was like really sick and I just like listed my offer for Rogaine and that's it. It took like 10 seconds. I just put a price and I said like, this is my price, done. And then I didn't check my computer for the whole weekend. I wake up on Monday feeling a little better and I look at my sales and I've done like $3,000-$4,000 in sales just, by creating an offer for
literally in your
people
sleep,
just buying it. Yeah. And when that happened, I was like, geez, okay. All I need to do is find good products and be able to just put it on this website and it'll go. So that's when I went all in.
It's essentially day trading with a little less risk, but the whole idea is buy low and sell high, right?
Yeah.
I guess, it's a bit more, day trading is a bit more volatile because things can turn at any minute. Same thing with Amazon.
Exactly.
Things go wrong, but oftentimes like with the right product, especially when we're talking about brands that already exist and already have customers and awareness, those can be a bit more stable. But in terms of like talking about, taking risks and maybe moving into something that is a little less stable within the Amazon world, you made the transition from arbitrage into wholesale and then kind of a wholesale into private label. Can you talk a little bit about that decision to move into private label? What was did you acknowledge the risks and how did you acknowledge the risks? And what were some of those challenges that came along with it?
Yeah, so the wholesale was pretty natural because of like the whole Rogaine product. And I was like, okay, what's next? How can I sell this to more people? And so I was buying Rogaine from like, let's say another retailer. And then ultimately I try to find and get closer to the source to be able to get better pricing. So I was selling that on Amazon for a while. And then I started to make good money from it. But at the same time, because it was the arbitrage between like US and Canada, I knew that something was not sustainable. And it turned out to be the case because the reason why Rogaine in Canada is more expensive is because Health Canada is different than FDA, like in the US. So Johnson & Johnson had to like formulate again, had to like maybe take out some ingredients. They had to repackage and put French labeling on the products. So it was a gray area of like, okay, these products are pretty much the same, but the Canadian versions are really like for Canada. And so, there's a difference there. And so I started to like try and like figure out how I could like just make this more legit rather than just this gray area under the table. And I think I knocked on too many doors and then Health Canada came at me. Health Canada realized what I was doing and they actually ended up raiding one of my like prep centers for like $4,000 worth of Rogaine. They took it all and they told me like, you can't do this anymore. Johnson & Johnson sent me a cease and desist.
Wait. We need to hear this story. They raided.
Yeah.
Oh, they raided a space of yours? Like dudes in suits coming in, not showing a warrant or something? Like what that's crazy. What was that about?
So I wasn't actually there because it was a prep center, but I remember my main contact at the prep center called me one day and he's like, dude, what just happened? A bunch of Health Canada officers rolled in and they took all of your products. And I was like, oh, shoot. I guess I've been talking to them and trying to figure out how to not do this anymore and like, you know, what I'm doing wrong. But yeah, they just weren't happy with me bringing in American product and selling it to Canadian consumers, I guess, without the labeling.
I'm shocked. That is incredible. That's incredible. Oh my goodness. Okay. And so, so this was a realization that you needed to make a change and do something that was a bit more sustainable in the long term and above board.
Exactly. Things that are more legit, things that I guess are more under my control. And so, yeah, naturally, I was like, what's the next step for an Amazon business? And I started to look into private label, and I was like, okay, this looks like the next step. You know, this is like building your own brand. You have more control. You're building IP. You know, this looks really interesting. And so I took the Amazing Selling Machine course at the time. I went all in. I was just reinvesting in myself, reinvesting in the business. So I took it super seriously. And yeah, within, I want to say like 6 months of taking the course, I created the brand Penguini and spent lots of money and time into the brand. And yeah, I just, you know, for me, it was the logical next step. And even looking back now, it's still the logical next step. You know, even now when I coach and mentor, I tell everyone like, look, private label is great. However, if you're new to the e-commerce game, you got to take the logical stepping stones. You can't just exactly. You don't want to jump into private label from the get-go because there's so many moving parts and it's so easy for you to just like mess it up or lose motivation and just stop. And then it's just wasted effort.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. You know, I think that from like conversations that I have with sellers of all different sizes who have gone through similar progressions, you know, one of the things you hear over and over is that, you know, when you're doing the arbitrage thing and you're buying and you're listing for, you know, your 10, 20, 30% markup, and that's where you're taking your cut, there's something like it is valuable in a sense that, you know, you're able to make that extra money, but also you're able to learn all these like all the intricacies of Amazon, because Amazon is so much more than just listing a product and letting it run. You know, all the like these micro actions for logistics that you have to do, from, you know, inbound shipping in the right type of packaging with the right labels and the right barcodes and to the right warehouses. Like these are all things that you have to learn. And, you know, one of the things I understand is that, you know, once you get into the private label, you're already investing so much money. You want to make sure that you've kind of done those learnings. You don't want to make the mistakes, you know, during a product launch. Better to make mistakes when you're selling, like reselling toothpaste or whatever.
That's exactly it. Yeah. There's a lot of people who will get into it, make those mistakes, and then never see the light at the end of the tunnel because, you know, they've made a big mistake or whatever the case may be. They're just demotivated now. But, you know, with that being said, even me going into private label, it was a bit of a success. Like I still generated $300,000 with that brand, but it was still a failure in my eyes because the main product that I had was getting mixed reviews. Like I had people who loved the product, and then I had people who were just like, this doesn't work, I don't like it. So my review, my star rating came to about 3.8 out of 5, and that should have been the main like indication of move on. But I was so in love with the product and not so much like the game that it kind of became, you know, the whole issue of me not succeeding in private label and then ultimately going back into wholesale and like really doing wholesale the right way of calling suppliers, distributors, expanding that way. And, you know, so now I'm back into wholesale mostly, and the private label business has been coasting, but I'm actually selling it to someone, funny enough, like within the next week, hopefully, to just kind of like move on from it and then potentially maybe get back into private label later. But yeah.
Wow. That's super interesting. So it seems like it's almost the same, you know, it had the same emotional aspect for you as like the day trading. We keep on going back, but sometimes you get really hooked into something that you think is a good idea, and, you know, you put your blood, sweat, and tears, and it's difficult to let go. So I can appreciate how when you sink your teeth into something, it's really hard to see the whole picture, the different emotions. Because like we all like to think, if you're owning a business, if you're operating a business, if you're working in a business, we all like to think that we make really logical decisions, but as humans, we make really emotional decisions, and that's just like on the day to day. And I find that in myself all the time, where I'm like, what was I'll come out of a meeting, and maybe it'll be a meeting that doesn't go too well, and I'm like, what was I doing? Why was I so hooked on that thing being blue when I don't really care if it's blue or not? And and sometimes you just need to take that step back.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And so, in terms of, it sounds like, your Amazon journey has a lot of different points. Sometimes it sounds like sometimes it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, or at every variation of that, and now you're in a position where you have people that look up to you and that you're coaching and you're teaching along the way. Can you talk a little bit about, that decision to start doing that? Like, why did you start doing that? And kind of what is the base of that? What does that model kind of look like for you or for your students?
Yeah, absolutely. So around the time I went into private label and then back into wholesale, I want to say it was towards 2019, 2020. And I just had learned so much by then, and I had realized what to do, what not to do. And I was in the business for a while where my friends started to realize that I was doing pretty well and that, I was just growing and kind of succeeding with what I was focusing on since 2017, 2018. And so naturally, friends of mine started to ask how they could do it and if I could help them. And so I started to help a couple friends and then friends of friends. And then ultimately I was like, okay, why not just mentor a few people, right? And I was always a big believer in not wanting to become a guru, let's say, until I've done at least like $1 million in sales, like breaking that 7 figures, because there are too many people who start Amazon, do it for 6 months, and then sure, they'll learn a lot, but let's say they're not as successful as they thought they'd be, then transition into coaching because, they'll just convince a few people to pay them thousands of dollars. And so I was against that, and I wanted to really get to a level of like success to be able to first like even talk about that publicly. And so I was proud to like be able to do that. And then once I've also helped a few people close to me, I started to realize, okay, like let me now just put out good content, good information. And so I started to expand that and then started to build a TikTok channel about 3 years ago, also just talking about my experience. I've been able to grow that to about 55 or 52,000 followers. And funny enough, nothing comes with its own struggles. Like everything, comes with its own struggles. Like nothing comes without the struggles.
Right.
Because even with TikTok, funny enough, when I hit about 30,000 followers, my TikTok account got banned. And I was like, what am I going to do? Start over again? And the whole reason he got banned is because I guess I make claims or I talk about, look, how much money you can make, how much money people make on Amazon Canada, USA by like showing Smart Scout's map.
Yeah.
And after about 10 or 15 like algorithmic bans, even when I would like appeal them and get my videos reinstated, those initial bans still caused my profile. After about 15 to 20 of those, my profile just got banned. They were just like, whoa, you're done. And I was like, what the heck? Like this was such a good outlet, such a good place for me to like put out content. It was growing. I hit 30K followers. So I was like pretty much done for a whole month and I didn't know what to do. I was just like so bummed out, and I started a new account. I started to think about other ways of making content on TikTok until I hired a lawyer.
Wow.
And get this. Yeah, I hired a lawyer and I was like talking to him about it. And he sent TikTok a bunch of emails and heard nothing back, right? We appealed a bunch of times, heard nothing back.
Okay.
Then I thought about the cease and desist I got from Johnson & Johnson back in the day. And I was like, whenever they send these cease and desists, it's usually like physical mail through FedEx, like courier, like super hardcore. And I was like, why don't we try that? My lawyer's like, sure, we could try that. doesn't like harm anything. And we created literally the draft of like, you know, you're killing my client's like reputation, blah, blah, blah. It was a good like source of income, business for him. We printed it, sent it through FedEx to the head office in Toronto. Within 24 hours, Ian, I kid you not, they opened my account again and just like completely were just like, sent me an email as well from their lawyers being like, sorry.
Oops.
Literally.
And then you sent Health Canada to the TikTok headquarters in Toronto, told them what's up, and got the Rogaine back as well.
Yeah, I wish. But man, the ups and downs of doing business and the being creative part is so important, and just not giving up. So that's really the moral of the story of everything.
It's just a bit of persistence, you know? I love that. I mean, I think that that's such a, I don't think I've had a guest on the pod with back-to-back crazy stories like that. Is incredible. But, you know, I think that it's one of those things that people and businesses go through crazy things all the time. And I'm sure that, you know, especially if it's your first time where something happens to you, like I don't expect everyone's 3PL to get raided, but, you know, if it's the first time that Amazon takes down your Amazon store or TikTok takes down your account or whatever happens, you know, you get a cease and desist from a brand, like these kinds of things happen. And it doesn't mean that you're, you know, it doesn't mean that you're doing anything out of malice. It doesn't mean that you're a bad business person, and it doesn't mean that you're screwed. Sometimes it might mean that you're screwed, but it doesn't always mean it. But I think that one of the things that's I find really great about, you know, the Amazon selling community, and especially people, you know, in the TikTok, Instagram space, is that, like, I think people hearing these stories realize that in the moments that it happens to them, they're like, okay, this sucks, and I can get through it. You know, it doesn't suck, but I got to do something, or but I can't do something. It sucks, and I can continue to find a way to persist. So I love those things of like really big outside forces, you know, rocking your core businesses. And that, you know, one thing you couldn't do much about, you know, Health Canada, but the other thing you could take creative steps to make better.
Yeah. I think in both scenarios, there's always like an outcome that could be positive, right? Like you could always learn from it and move on. You could always do things differently. Like I think these days, the worst thing that happens to a lot of new sellers is like they buy from the wrong people, especially in the wholesale game. And then they can't prove an invoice to Amazon after getting an IP complaint, and then their Amazon account gets shut down. That's pretty severe. I'm not gonna lie, because if your Amazon account's gone, then, you know, you have to be super creative to maybe join forces with someone else to be able to open up a new account. But Amazon is pretty tight on that. But in all these other scenarios, you know, it's always like a hurdle. It's never like a, you know, just a complete shutdown. And so if you're hopeful, if you're persistent, if, you know, you see the end goals, I think the universe will also help you in some ways to really push you and get to there. I believe in that strongly.
I wholeheartedly agree, you know, and, you know, when it comes to problems, if you come up to a wall, if you can't go over it, you can't go around it, you go under, you go through, like there's always a way. So I love that sentiment. So Nick, just, you know, kind of as we get towards the end of the episode, what's next? You know, you got the Amazon businesses running, a couple different, you know, business models, you got the coaching, you got the content creation, you know, what's next what's in the pipeline for you?
Yeah, I would say continuously growing the wholesale business, right? Since we came back from private label, that's been my main focus. I'm working on getting more brand exclusivities to be able to represent brands more directly on Amazon, but still working with some really great distributors to be able to simply buy low and sell high. That model still works. It's just you need to dig deep to find those suppliers. And on top of that, I've also been exploring a new method that I've created myself now called the mom and pop arbitrage method. And because it's very, very, I would say, difficult these days to be able to open up and find new wholesalers, because there are so many Amazon sellers trying to do that and they just come and go. And so a lot of suppliers have been creating higher walls to be able to not maybe deal with newbie Amazon sellers. The mom and pop arbitrage method, as I call it, is to be able to help people just work with mom and pop stores that are smaller, potentially struggling as well, to be able to use their already nurtured suppliers. Right. So that's their way of getting into the wholesale game by, let's say teaming up with a pet store that is in a quiet plaza. And if you can team up with them, you can then use their authorized distributors to sell it on Amazon.
Yeah.
So these are the ideas that I'm mostly working on right now. And then, of course, coaching, consulting, I do that with, I guess, a small group of people just because it does take up a lot of time and I need to focus on my own businesses. But of course, content creation, as well as the coaching is one world. And then I've also, and I want to probably say that this is the last thing because my bandwidth is limited, is the tool that you mentioned at the beginning here, creating what's called FBA scope. And it is essentially allowing resellers to be able to score their products very quickly, to be able to understand if it's a good opportunity they should look further into, or if it's something that within seconds they should be like, nope.
That's
right. So being able to zoom that out as well and overlaying that maybe on Smart Scout or something like that to be able to just quickly get like a 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 based on your own product checklist is what we're working on. It's already launched. And so, plate is full. Let's put it that way.
Totally. Yeah. You're a busy guy. Yeah. That's amazing.
Not to mention the traveling.
Yeah. Dude,
right.
We can't get into the digital nomad stuff, but we get it. You're out and about and you got your hands full.
Yeah, but it's the way I know how to live. I like it. And, you can't do it alone. And that's why having a strong team, having strong partnerships with the engineer, my friend who is taking the lead on FBA Scope, it's all available through those ends. And so it's important to be able to find people like that to join on your venture.
Incredible. So Nick, as we kind of wrap up before we sign off, you got any final thoughts for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that a lot of people are just getting into the Amazon space. And if that's true, then really understand the stepping stones of Amazon, right? Like, don't put too much onto your plate from the get-go. Try not to do 4 or 5 different things at the same time. I've really believed and really seen that focus is everything, right? I think the secret to success is niche down and do one thing really, really well. Mm-hmm. And then, as Alex Hormozy has said, once that cup or bucket starts to overflow, then start to think about diversifying.
Sure.
And so even that's the same case with, let's say, wholesale and private label at the same time, right? I did that for a while and realized still it's my attention could be the success of my project could be better if I was 80%, 90% on one thing rather than 50-50. Yeah. So really focus in what you see and what you want to do. Spend at least a year building that out. And then once you see some success, then diversify into other things. Again, even in the Amazon space, right? I've been at it for 6 years now. So I can say that I feel confident expanding and doing software and coaching and potentially another private label down the line. But it all starts off with focus.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think sometimes, even in myself taking on new projects, sometimes my eyes are a bit bigger than my stomach, so to speak. And I think that's great advice to really, it's not about being realistic, it's about, understanding your bandwidth and what you can accomplish. So I love that.
Yeah. It's just super hard these days because of social media, right? You just see everyone doing something else and you're like, let's do this, let's do that. But yeah, you need to.
Well, yeah, you forget about the core. You forget about what it is. I just saw this video of Tom Brady speaking to a bunch of high school kids. And he was saying that a bunch of high school football players, I should say. And he was saying that the biggest mistake he sees in high school football players is that they are, although they're really talented and they're more talented than high school football players have ever been before, it's something about that they're all so focused on, you know, building their brand and being the star, that they're not, you know, being champions, because champions take a team. And so though, like, my takeaway from that is that, you know, you get so, like, it's possible to get so tied up in like the shiny things that we see on TikTok, that we see on Instagram, whatever, to try to build that brand and to try to be a star, that we forget about the hard work it takes. And the thing that really matters, and what really mattered to Tom Brady, and I guess it's easy for him to say, is winning championships. And so, like, I thought that was like pretty inspiring, because you, like, sometimes you want to be the person, you want to be the guy, but it's important to focus on, like, what does that get you? And what we're looking for is championships. What we're looking for is successful businesses, and that takes the focus, like you mentioned.
Exactly.
Nick, I wanted to thank you for joining us, and for, you know, to our audience who made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in, learning from Nick Milani with us, everything about from Amazon selling to the different transitions between the different types of Amazon selling, some of the things that happen along the way that can cause speed bumps, and how important it is to persevere and be creative. I know I definitely learned a few things, and I hope you did too. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe to it on your favorite podcast channel or on YouTube, and give it a like as well. And until next time, we'll catch you on Not Another Econ Podcast. Bye-bye.